A young man is publicly humiliated and fired by his powerful CEO father-in-law. Broken, jobless, and underestimated, he disappears for months, only to return with a revolutionary luxury tech company that shakes the entire industry. As his empire rises, the same man who fired him suddenly realizes the boy he crushed has become the biggest threat to his legacy. He always believed dignity was earned, not inherited. But that belief shattered the day his father-in-law, the same man who once called him family, stood over him in the executive boardroom and said the three words that cut deeper than humiliation: "You're fired. Leave." There were no emotions in the CEO's eyes. No hesitation. No mercy. Just a cold decision wrapped in corporate arrogance. A room full of executives watched silently, pretending not to see the young man's world collapsing. His wife sat across the table, frozen, confused, but she said nothing. Not a single word in his defense. He walked out quietly, holding the last shred of pride he had left. No job. No support. No home, because family house was actually their house. And that night, the last message he received from his father-in-law's assistant was short and sharp. "We expect you to remove your belongings by morning." For the first time in years, he slept alone on a friend's sofa, staring at an empty ceiling, trying to understand how a man's entire identity could be wiped away in a single meeting. But pain has a strange way of becoming fuel. And humiliation, when crushed deep inside the chest, slowly transforms into a kind of fire that no one can extinguish. In the weeks that followed, silence became his closest friend. No celebrations. No parties. No comfort. Just a man sitting in front of his laptop, surrounded by late-night coffee cups and unanswered questions. But every night, one sentence echoed in his mind. "If I'm capable of being destroyed this easily, maybe I was never meant to stay small." He began sketching ideas, disruptive ones, wild ones, ideas that didn't fit the polite corporate cages his father-in-law built his empire in. He studied user behavior, luxury branding, high-end product psychology, and emerging tech trends with an obsession that bordered on madness. People saw him as unemployed. He saw himself as rebuilding. Quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. Some nights he slept 2 hours. Some nights he didn't sleep at all. He reached out to old colleagues, not to ask for jobs, but to understand the gaps in the market. He wasn't looking for opportunities. He was designing a revolution disguised as a product. A product that would later become the identity of his entire empire. And then came the moment everything clicked. One cold morning, after 12 hours of work without blinking, he stared at his screen and whispered, "This is it. This changes everything." A luxury tech product, sleek, minimal, powerful, designed not just for utility, but for status. Something that didn't compete with big brands. It challenged them by becoming a symbol of perfection. It wasn't just tech. It was ambition molded into metal, innovation carved into design, and revenge wrapped in elegance. But ideas alone don't build empires. Resources do. And he had none. Still, he moved forward. He met investors. Most of them laughed at his proposal. Some rejected him before he even finished speaking. One even said, "If your father-in-law didn't keep you, why should we risk our money on you?" He simply smiled, because beneath every insult, he sensed a strange kind of fuel. Finally, after dozens of closed doors, one investor didn't laugh. He didn't smile either. He simply said, "You look like a man who has nothing left to lose. That makes you dangerous. I'll invest." With funding secured, things changed fast. He built a team, small, hungry, brilliant. People who didn't care about past reputation, but future potential. People who were ready to work like their lives depended on it. He set up a workspace in a rented warehouse, converting empty walls into whiteboards filled with futuristic sketches and timelines. Every inch of that place smelled like ambition. Every sound, typing, tools, brainstorming, arguments, was the sound of something extraordinary being born. And as production started, he made one rule that shaped everything. No shortcuts. No cheap materials. No compromises. If it isn't the best, it doesn't leave this room. Weeks turned to months. Prototypes failed, broke, heated up, cracked, malfunctioned. But every failure sharpened the next version. Every flaw led to a more perfect design. Until one night, under a dim warehouse light, the final prototype lit up perfectly in his hands. A device so elegant, so flawlessly crafted, that even he couldn't believe it was real. Not a gadget, not an accessory, but a statement, luxury and innovation fused together in a way the market had never seen before. He stood there motionless, holding the future in his hands. Not the future his father-in-law offered him, but the one he forged from the ashes of humiliation. The next step was the launch. A high-end event, minimal but breathtaking, attended by tech analysts, creators, and investors who had once ignored his emails. The presentation wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. He walked onto the stage with the calm confidence of a man who had rebuilt himself brick by brick. And when he placed the product on the stand, a silent shock spread through the entire hall. People leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Hands reached out instinctively. It wasn't a product. It was an experience. And in the first 3 hours of launch, they sold out. Completely. Every unit. Every pre-order slot. Every limited edition. His team cried. He didn't. He simply closed his eyes and took a breath, a long, steady breath, the kind a man takes when the universe finally whispers, "You are right to believe in yourself." What he didn't know was that his father-in-law, the CEO who humiliated him, was watching the news quietly in his office. And for the first time in years, the man felt afraid. Because this wasn't just a product launch. This was the rise of a competitor powerful enough to challenge his entire legacy. He didn't celebrate. Not yet. Success, he believed, was only real when it became impossible to ignore, and his father-in-law was the biggest proof that the world still hadn't seen enough. The first launch was only the spark. Now he needed a fire big enough to make the entire market turn its head. The morning after the sold-out release, his team walked into the warehouse-turned-headquarters with a new kind of energy, the kind that only comes when you realize you're part of something historic. No one complained about long hours anymore. No one asked about weekends. They were building more than a company. They were building a phenomenon. He expanded the workspace, turning empty industrial halls into design labs filled with cutting-edge tools. Walls were lined with sketches for their next innovations, devices so futuristic they looked like props stolen from the next decade. He set up dedicated rooms for durability tests, design refinement, luxury packaging, and customer experience. Every department moved with one shared heartbeat. He became the kind of leader people followed without being asked. Calm. Strategic. Precise. He didn't shout, didn't panic, didn't break under pressure. Maybe because breaking was something he had already done months ago, and once a man rebuilds himself from nothing, fear loses its meaning. But outside his rising empire, storms were forming. His father-in-law's company was facing issues, silent ones that didn't show up on public reports. Sales were slowing. A major product failed to attract attention. Meetings were longer than usual. Executives whispered in hallways, trying to understand why the market was shifting away from them. The old CEO pretended everything was under control, but the truth was cruel. The young man he once dismissed like a meaningless footnote had become the author of a new chapter in the tech industry. Word spread fast. Analysts on social media compared both companies. Luxury reviewers made side-by-side breakdowns. Influencers posted videos titled, "This new brand is destroying old tech giants." Every headline, every review, every mention acted like a spotlight slowly turning in one direction, towards him. And then came the interview. A major business channel requested a feature on his overnight success. He agreed. The studio set was elegant, modern, and the host opened with a question sharp enough to cut. "Your father-in-law fired you. Now your company is outperforming his. How does it feel?" He didn't react. He didn't smile. He didn't take revenge through words. He simply replied, "I don't compete with people. I compete with my own limits." The clip went viral instantly. Because that sentence didn't just sound powerful, It exposed the difference between him and the man who once tried to break him. Meanwhile, in the old CEO's office, tension tightened like a rope. The board members started questioning leadership, asking why their competitor, a company built in months, was innovating faster than a corporation with decades of experience. The father-in-law defended himself, but every argument sounded weaker than the last. Pride blinds men, and humiliation wakes them up. His downfall began quietly. A delayed product, a failed partnership, a sudden drop in stock confidence. Mistakes he once ignored now hit like earthquakes. And in the background, the new empire grew like a rising tide. But the young founder wasn't thinking about revenge.
He was thinking about expansion.
He opened a flagship store, a luxurious space with polished marble floors, ultra-minimal interiors, and soft lighting that made every product glow like a jewel. People lined up outside the doors before the grand opening, some waiting for hours just to hold one of his creations. When he walked into the store on opening day, applause erupted. Not because he asked for it, but because people genuinely admired the vision he built from nothing. Customers shook his hand, influencers praised the craftsmanship, and even international press representatives attended. It wasn't fame he wanted. It was impact. And he had finally reached a place where his work spoke louder than any legacy he had been denied. But fate loves symmetry. And one evening, as the store buzzed with customers, he turned towards the glass entrance and froze. There stood his father-in-law. The same CEO who once stripped him of dignity was now walking into his empire, slowly, stiffly, carrying a weight he never had before. His shoulders weren't broad with confidence anymore. His eyes weren't filled with authority. They held something else, something unfamiliar. Regret. The older man approached him, pausing just a few feet away. He looked around, taking in the crowd, the acclaim, the luxury, the success carved into every corner of the room. Finally, he spoke, not with arrogance, but with hesitance. "You built all this in months." He didn't answer.
He didn't need to.
The father-in-law continued, voice trembling with a mix of shock and acceptance. "I underestimated you. I thought you were too soft, too young, too inexperienced." Silence settled between them. Customers nearby watched, sensing tension but not understanding the storm underneath. Then came the words the old CEO never expected to say in his lifetime. "I may have made a mistake firing you." But the young founder wasn't the same man who once walked out of a boardroom with broken pride. He had grown,
Hardened.
and evolved in ways the old CEO could never imagine. He simply said, "You didn't make a mistake. You did me a favor." The father-in-law swallowed, caught between awe and discomfort. "Your company is being compared to us everywhere. Our board says we need a collaboration with you, a partnership, maybe even a merger." A partnership? With a company that once threw him out like a disposable intern? He didn't respond immediately. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Instead, he looked right into the older man's eyes and said, "I didn't build this empire to be part of yours." The father-in-law's face fell. It wasn't rejection that hurt him. It was the realization that he no longer held power over the man he once controlled. Meanwhile, customers behind them began clapping as another product sold out. Cameras flashed. Influencers filmed. His store was glowing. His empire was rising. And the old CEO, standing in the middle of all that, finally understood the truth. He didn't fire a weakness. He pushed a legend into existence. And legends don't go back. They only rise higher.